Episode 4 of The Legend of Vox Machina begins with Uriel commanding Vox Machina's arrest. Vex tries to convince Lady Allura that Uriel is under the Briarwood's influence. Allura takes their testimony under consideration, but says they will be placed under house arrest until they can get the Briarwood's side of the story. As the Lord and Lady of Whitestone are fleeing, Delilah notices that their book is missing, the same that Vax stole in the last episode. Silas tells her not to worry, they have means of retrieving it. While the rest of the group tries to figure out what the Briarwood's book says, Pike sulks. Ever since Delilah hit her with a spell, she hasn't been able to do any magic and feels as if the Everlight has left her. She doesn't tell her friends this, however. The others press Percy to reveal more about his connection to the Briarwoods. He says they initially came to Whitestone as allies. His own tutor betrayed his family to the couple, which was when they slaughtered his family. Percy says he was almost able to escape with his sister Cassandra. He doesn't finish his statement, but we see a flashback in which his sister is hit with arrows as they are trying to flee. After hearing this story, they all try to escape house arrest so they can act on the Briarwood's threat. But the guards catch them and separate them into 3 groups. Caliph tries to encourage Percy by letting him know he's not entirely alone. She reveals that she may never see her family again. She must complete what's called an aramente to prove herself worthy. Only then can she return home. Although Percy says their situations are very different, he also tells her she's damn worthy. Vex and Vax muse that they could easily escape the guards' notice if they left without the group. With a look to each other and a, dare I say, fond glance towards Scanlan, it's decided. They're staying. Pike, in the meantime, confesses to Grog her feeling that the Everlight has left her. Grog innocently suggests that the Everlight could be mad at her. Perhaps she just needs to apologize. Meanwhile, Silas and Delilah send creatures upon Vox Machina's keep to find the book. When they slay 5 guards, chaos ensues. The guards band together with Vox Machina to fight the skeletal, shadowy creatures that cause all the lights to go out. The creatures possess several of them, causing black liquid to stream out of their eyes and mouths. Pike tries to summon light to help them. Again, she can't. Percy calls out to a frightened Caliph that it's time to prove herself. For the first time, the druid summons a burst of sunlight. It allows them, finally, to be able to injure these foes. After the fight, the guards let them go. The next day, the group catches Percy attempting to leave for Whitestone. They say they are coming with him to beat Silas, end his hold on Uriel, and clear their names. Pike lingers behind, however. She thinks Grog was right. She can't hear the Everlight anymore and needs to tell her she's sorry. Grog offers to help, but she says she must do it alone. As the others trek toward Whitestone, it's only Grog and Scanlan who look back at Pike as she walks in the opposite direction. Theories of Episode 4 proffers a beautifully executed fight scene against some ghastly foes. If you like a macabre edge to your adventure stories, I think you'll like where the series is heading. The Briarwoods have some intensely dark magic on their side. Due to Pike's story thread with the Everlight, the plot of this installment felt somewhat disjointed. Pike's arc, though moving, seemed thrown together and ill-explained. Maybe that's a drawback to adapting a D&D campaign for television. The same story may not always play out so naturally in a different medium. The rest of the episode felt very cohesive, however, especially with several touching moments that showed the group looking out for each other. One of the things I like about the series is how it started with both ill feelings and great chemistry between the party members. That leaves a lot of room for moments like we see in this episode, where we get to witness strong bonds develop. It looks like the Briarwood thread isn't going away anytime soon, not as long as Vox Machina has their precious book. Hopefully we'll find out soon exactly what information the book possesses. Episode 5 of The Legend of Vox Machina begins with Vex, Vax, and Caliph attempting to steal vampire hunting supplies from Gilmore's shop after hours. The proprietor catches them mid-theft, and luckily, he's fond of them. They're able to purchase supplies from Gilmore, including a vial of holy water. The rest of the party manages to steal a carriage, and they head off for Whitestone. On the way, Scanlan tries to decipher Delilah's handwriting in her book, but the only word he can make out is ziggurat. Caliph says she studied about ziggurats in preparation for her aramente. They are ancient structures used for contacting gods. Vex, meanwhile, notices that something is tracking them. Suddenly, mutant, wolf-like creatures surround them. One of them captures Scanlan, who holds the book, Vox Machina chases after them to try and save Scanlan. When the beast jumps off a cliff with the gnome, Vex shoots an arrow towards him with a rope attached. The party jumps off the carriage just before it crashes off the cliff. They have lost all of their supplies. And they think they have lost Scanlan too. However, just as they begin to mourn his loss, he rises up on his purple Bigby's hand. But he doesn't have the book. They instead see it in the mouth of one of the wolf creatures as it runs towards Whitestone to bring it to its master. Back at Whitestone, Delilah Briarwood consults Professor Anders about an upcoming ritual. Just then, a group of peasants arrives. The Briarwoods supposedly chose them for a special event. While her friends are adventuring, Pike approaches a temple on her own. She explains to a cleric that a dark mage cracked her holy symbol. She believes she is now cursed. The cleric assures her that, whatever happened, the Everlight accepts her as she is. Vox Machina sets up camp meanwhile. Caliph tells Vax about her home and how she is supposed to be a leader someday. She becomes discouraged by some of Vex's earlier words. Vax tells her not to listen to his sister. He believes that she will make a great leader. Vex notices their exchange from afar and doesn't seem to like it. She tells her brother not to get distracted by pretty things. Vax assures her there is nothing to worry about. When asked, Percy describes Whitestone to everyone. It's a beautiful, lush land. At its center is the sun tree, a great tree that stood as a symbol of the Dorolo's ties to the city. When they arrive, the city is nothing like Percy described. Whitestone is practically a wasteland. Percy wants to find the holy woman of the town. If she is still there, they can trust her. But something stops him in his tracks. The episode ends by panning up to the sun tree. Hanging from it are the bodies of the peasants who attended the Briarwood special event, all of them dead and dressed to look like the members of Vox Machina. Theorists of Episode 5 move slowly, seeing Vox Machina through their preparations for their journey to Whitestone. My favorite part of this installment was all the sweet interactions between Vax and Caliph. It's been obvious since Episode 1 that there's a romance brewing between the two, at least on Vax's end, but Vex's perspective certainly complicates things. The dynamic between the three of them, Vex, Vax, and Caliph, is an interesting one, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. Although not much happens in this episode, it does set the stage for a wicked ritual in the most blood-curdling way. Whatever the Briarwoods' plans, they must require the book. I'm guessing a ziggurat located in Whitestone is involved, but what god does Delilah need to contact, and why? Episode 6 of The Legend of Vox Machina begins in the company of unfamiliar characters. An officer reports to a man named Archibald that giants have wiped out the entire eastern faction of Whitestone. This Archibald then commands his people to gather every able body in the city. A woman named Bryn strides in to report that the Briarwoods have moved the Kestrel to be with Professor Anders. Archibald says they will want to extract her. Just then, the room quakes around them. One of the aforementioned giants smashes into the ceiling. A grotesque-looking gray-skinned man, we later learn his name is Stonewell, enters to capture Archibald. As Vox Machina observes the horrible sight hanging from the sun tree, a woman tells them to get off the streets and hide. They conceal themselves just as a giant lumbers by. The woman notices the Dorolo crest on Percy and asks if they are part of the resistance. They deny it, but convince the woman to bring them to Yenin, the holy woman. Percy is certain she can help. When they find her, Yenin is giving a pacifist speech. Percy approaches her, and she immediately remarks that he has changed. Yenin takes them to an old resistance hideout. She tells them the only way they can win against the Briarwoods is if the resistance is strong enough. But the Briarwoods have taken their leader, Archibald Desnay, whom Percy grew up with. During this discussion, Caliph sees roots of the sun tree growing into the hideout. She asks if it can hear her and introduces herself as Caliph of the Ashari. Meanwhile, Pike meditates to seek the Everlight. When she calls for her, a fire bursts up and consumes her in her meditative state. She jolts awake and informs the clerics at the temple that her curse is preventing contact. One of the clerics assures her that no curse could do such a thing. Whatever is severing her connection to the Everlight is inside of Pike. Back at Whitestone, Stonewell brings in a towering man called Duke Vedmire to torture Archie. He says they know about his spy, the Kestrel. They want him to tell them where to find other confidants, including Vox Machina. All the while, Vox Machina breaks into the manor where Archie is being kept, and they pick up prisoners along the way. Just as they find Archie, Stonewell initiates a fight. He very nearly kills Scanlan. Vox Machina fights well, and they believe they can escape with Archie. However, they realize that Percy has gone missing. Percy chased after Stonewell. We see him with his mask on. Shadows rise from his gun, they cover his body. He points the gun at Stonewell, exclaiming that he will take vengeance for the Derolos. He then shoots Stonewell, then takes off his mask to show his face. Percy? Stonewell recognizes him just before he is shot several times. Vax rushes onto the scene, and Percy turns to point his weapon at his friend. Vax scolds him for compromising their mission, but Percy just yells at him that one will stand in his way as the last living member of the Derolo family. Archie then gently corrects him. He is not the last of the Derolos. His sister Cassandra lives. While the rest of the party finishes up the fight, the scene cuts to the Briarwoods Manor. Delilah stands behind Cassandra. She acknowledges that the young woman must have heard about her brother. However, she says, this changes nothing. Theories of Episode 6. The plot thickens. A fascinating storyline unfolds, uncovering several more significant players in the battle for Whitestone. We get another gory, well-executed battle and various hilarious one-liners throughout this installment. But most interestingly, this episode drops many nuggets of relevant information. Who is the Kestrel? It could be code to refer to Cassandra, although we last saw her with the Briarwoods, not Professor Anders. Added to that, she wasn't detained, which makes that cliffhanger even more intriguing. At the very least, we know the Kestrel is a captured spy. That little aside between Caliph and the Sun Tree will also likely be important in the episodes to come. I have a feeling some of the Dawnfather's magic could come in clutch against the Briarwood's dark sorcery.